you doing? What have you got? What's your drink in your hand?
Good. Vodka. No. Green tea and grapefruit.
Fantastic. That's a good one.
How
Dan,
you doing?
welcome to episode 2 of Twisted Vibrations, Travelers of the Astral and Physical Planes, or Realms, if you will.
Love it. And I love that behind you is all clouds as well. As you're
Yeah,
talking
I'm
about astral
I'm up in the
realms
clouds. It's
up in the sky.
yeah. So
Nice.
Dan, how are things in the physical or astral planes? Which one do you prefer to hang out in right now?
Probably both actually. I've got one foot in either side,
Yeah.
physical stuff, diet, body, food. And then meditation is definitely alleviating, the situation in England, and energy work is definitely alleviating that. So yeah, no, good. Just
Yeah,
keeping the balance.
I think a lot of light workers have really taken a lot of use of the time that they've had right now.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
probably one of the most. I think light workers and entrepreneurs, and I think if you kind of fall into both categories, then you're really kind of taking advantage of this. So
Exactly. Exactly. It's a situation that we might not get again, without so many, sort of materialistic distractions, shall we say? You
yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, I think the whole going out and socializing thing can be quite distracting, and I think I've taken advantage of that. That's for sure, because
Mhm.
me, I like to surround myself with people, and hence doing
Mhm.
doing these podcasts have kind of given me another outlet to just be social and I don't
Right.
avoid other stuff. But so what have you been doing to keep you busy lately? Has it been tarot readings, or are you developing something else?
Yeah, so I've been developing my sound workshops and looking at notes and frequencies and stuff. So actually planning those, developing tarot workshops, incorporating my art into the readings as well, like designing a deck and seeing if I want to produce any sort of products, any sort of spiritual, pieces or anything like that. What else? Lots and lots and lots and lots of meditation. Working with crystals, some spell work, which is necessary.
Do
Huh?
tell the spell work. It's definitely not my forte. So I do have
Um,
a spell you gave me written down in my book of shadows way back when.
well, that maybe can be useful for you. Um, Spell work. What do you
Yeah.
want to know about it?
What exactly are you working on? What's the intent of spells at the moment?
So at the moment, I've always looked externally to like gather new knowledge when it came to my spells, or going into maybe more of a community, or looking at the way pagans practice or the way Wiccans practice. And then I realized I actually have this thing that I've done all of my life, which is tarot. And I was like, tarot spells, tarot spells, doing spells with the tarot instead.
Yeah.
Um, which is kind of like incorporating all these different interests, interest in the elements, you know, um, actually in one place, which is nice. It's a sort of blend. So I've been focusing on that and bringing in some rune work as well around that, and actually working with the runes to, yeah, as they can be great for like intention and direction.
How do the runes fit in? Because I remember a long time ago you suggested to me that runes like was very much my speed, but I've never really gotten onto it. How do the runes like differ from tarot? Because I feel like they're very, very similar, but is there
Hmm.
what's how
Yeah,
does
well, you're still working with archetypes.
mm,
You're still working with, gods, goddesses, and or elements and archetypes of those. Like there is a rune for lightning, There is a rune for hail, there's a rune for ice, there's a rune, so it's how we sort of associate and assimilate those archetypes within our narratives or, our lives, or, yeah. So the runes.
It sounds like the runes have got a lot more of a natural energy to it, whereas like the tarot kind of comes through more of an emotional energy. Would you say?
Right. Well, yeah, I feel like, you really touched on something there. I feel like the runes are kind of like shamanic, but like elemental and shamanic at times. And obviously they've got that European culture tied in there as well with Thor and Odin, which, yes, the tarot has as well, but not to the level of which the runes do.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's a language, it's an alphabet.
Yeah, right.
It's, yeah. And I guess it's not based on the Golden Dawn either. It's not as closely linked to the Golden Dawn tradition.
You're gonna have to tell me, what's Golden Dawn? It's the first time I've heard of that.
So, I'm really bad with names, but so the Golden Dawn, actually, there was a lodge in the UK where lots of people of writers, like people into the mystical arts, people into divination, A.E. Waite, who actually made the Rider-Waite.
Oh yeah.
He was in the Golden Dawn as well, and there's lots of branches that came off the Golden Dawn, but basically what they did is they practiced and they had their own sort of interest in spell work and mysticism, sometimes the occult, but like with anyone, you give an artist a paintbrush, you give these people these tools, and they go and do what they want to do as an individual, right? So it had many different branches, many different forms of expression, and lots of different sort of churches and organizations that rose up. They actually said, personally, I'm not Christian, but they said like Jesus was the master of the masters.
Well, he was turn water into wine and make fish and bread appear out of nowhere and walk on water. It's got to count for something.
Right. So they say he's the master magician, and Crowley was involved at one point, and then also branched off. So all these people were like involved in the Golden Dawn. It's very interesting. I think there's a website called, can't remember the name of the website, but there's lots of information out there for anyone who's interested in the Golden Dawn tradition.
How far back does that go? Because Aleister Crowley, I believe, would have been around our parents' generation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s.
That stands for some time then.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and lots of people were like kicked out and brought back in and made churches elsewhere and kicked out again. And, so there's lots of different sort of belief systems. And then you have the Rosicrucian, but I don't know much about that.
Which is like another sect.
Yeah. Yeah, right. But the runes and the language of the runes are not even, from my knowledge, not even related.
Yeah, it's a lot more ancient.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Where does your ancestry kind of come from? Because like very English yourself, and I do remember you mentioning you have kind of some gypsy heritage in you. How does that kind of all like link into that, do you think?
Well, we've had those DNA tests done, and first of all, yes, gypsy, but second of all, we actually had Inuit DNA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like North American or Scandinavian or Siberian? Like, how does that?
Yeah, like North American. And I was at a party once, and this lady came over to me and said, "You're an ice witch," and just left. And I was like, I was chilled before, and now I'm, why am I an ice witch? How am I an ice witch? And went on this huge thing. Anyway, so there's that, and then my grandfather was actually adopted, and that's the one who has the Inuit DNA. And and he was adopted, and actually there's a theory that he came from gypsies. There's no birth certificate. There's rumors, from the people who adopted him of where he came from. And he's rumored to actually be from a sort of gypsy sect, but not even in the UK, in Spain. So there is all this like following and tracing that they did that led them back there.
So have you looked much into like Inuit, like shamanism or witchcraft? Like you don't really think about it
No,
when you.
it would be interesting. I guess I don't know if that falls under the branch of folk magic or something like that. I know there's lots of different types of magic, isn't there?
Yeah, for
And
sure. I mean, if there's a religion around any culture, I think there's going to be some level of magic, you know?
right. And
Even,
if you're just starting out, sometimes that can be a bit like, oh, what am I? What am I? What do I fit into? Where am I? Where should I be? What should I do?
yeah.
But sometimes it's just about enjoying the exploration and having fun with it and just feeling into it, I guess.
How do you think that works with someone that's kind of, they're getting into magic and they're, perhaps, I think a lot of people of the Western world wear a mixed bag, ethnically speaking. Um,
Right.
and people are kind of getting into meditation. They're exploring just kind of witchcraft in general. But
Right.
like, how do you think that works? And how do you think someone should really go about like approaching witchcraft, not wanting to tread on anyone else's culture, but also want to embrace
Right.
and discover who they are? How does someone do that? Like, because it can be very, you know, where do you
So
go?
first of all, don't do what I did and don't dabble,
Right.
because it will everything, rule of thumb, everything is threefold.
Yeah.
Every single thing we put out into this universe is multiplied. Three is actually the minimum from my experience.
You're right.
And that takes a lot of uncrossing, unbind, like so much stuff is involved in that. What else? Groundedness,
Yeah.
like 100%, like wear your Moldavite, burn your frankincense, like hold on to your peacock or all that stuff, but ground.
Yeah, yeah. I was about to say, you said hold your Moldavite. I'm like, that's not grounding at all. Oh my, oh my. The amount of troubles people have experienced with just working with Moldavite, just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's trended big time in the last 12 months. I mean, at least since I've been on TikTok, the amount that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of taken off. But when you say like don't dabble, how does one not dabble without trying to explore what's right for them though? I mean, obviously
Right.
we start with our grounding, we do our meditation,
Mm-hmm.
um, two key things, I guess, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also, I mean, what is tried and tested? What is tried and tested, and also that thing of harm none.
mm,
It's such like a simple rule, but with that foundation, no harm will be done.
yeah.
With that foundation, then it gives us a lot of room to move in those circles and to, enjoy the craft, enjoy creating, to enjoy all the different processes and things you can discover, because that's what it's really about. It's about discovery, not gain, right?
Yeah.
It's about that like interest, that fun, that creativity within those sort of realms. But I would also say to people, like talk to people, engage, connect, ask people what their experiences are, ask them what they've gone through, and also don't be afraid of change. If something's not working, if you're starting out and you're like, I'm not connecting with this isn't my vibe, like don't feel the need to do everything just because it's what you see on social media.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. Yeah, I think and for those that are watching this, this is Dan. You may have heard me talk about. Dan was probably one of my first mentors, particularly when it came to tarot. So I think with a lot of the practices I did, Dan, like I never really got into anything unless I
mhm,
met somebody that's kind of like introduced it to me. I kind of allowed that to come to me. And this is kind of why I you know, with my with this podcast being travelers of the astral and the physical planes. Obviously anyone that's spiritual, okay, they're dropping into the astral, but I think to me, travel has been such a big thing because you were one of those people I discovered from travel. My partner, Carolina, I met the first guy that got me into crystals was travel, palmistry, getting into travel. You know, this is going to India, around all around Australia. I'm now in Europe, going to South America, and you know, shamanism is next on the list. You know, I'm not, you know, not necessarily going to actively seek it, but I think, you know, if I put myself in the right position, it'll come to me. You know, if you're not forcing that outcome, I think that's a really good, that's a really good thing to do. So yeah, like
And I
what's
think that what you just said as well is very poignant, not forcing the outcome, because I find maybe, you know, I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes in like energy work and magic and all stuff like that, when you're first starting out, it's tempting to try and force it. It's tempting to try and like push an outcome when it's more about the visualization of the outcome, you know, the acceptance of it, you know, rather than the yearning and pining.
Yeah,
But
I find that with the law of attraction and manifestation, and I get a lot of people come to me talking to me about, oh, you know, I've been wishing for money to come to me for so long, and I'm like, not quite approaching that right. You've got to start off just being grateful for what you have now, and you got to understand that, like, a lot of people, I think, you know, people are wanting that outcome. They're really trying to force this outcome of like, I want this. And I think people get a lot tunnel visioned in what it is they actually want. And what I've kind of discovered is, let's say, for example, I want money because I want to travel around the world more, but you don't always need that much money, because if you're putting yourself into that place, and Carolina and I got lucky, we got 75 euro tickets to South America, to Mexico. Like, money doesn't always play. You've just got to be in the right place at the right time, and you know, just let it happen in its own time.
Exactly. And also just accepting that phase, you know, and I mean, gratitude is everything. You look at frequency, and if you're into like sound healing or frequency healing or anything like that, gratitude is like, I think it's second from the like highest.
Love at the top.
Yeah, and then gratitude,
gratitude and forgiveness and
right.
you know,
and you know how that shifts your life. I know some, like, it can be frustrating when you're like, you know, I've been in situations where, you know, geez, I've not known where my next meal was going to come from in the past, you know, or you know, just tons of stuff. And that is actually the moment when it's most important.
Yeah.
Because that is the moment where real change can happen, and it's tangible to change as well.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, no, I want to backtrack to the lineage thing, because I didn't share with you about my granddad.
Yeah, sure.
So my granddad was actually a fighter.
Like boxing fighter, or like boxing wielding?
He was a fighting man. So he was really, really tall, and he was a traveler, and he never lost a fight in his life.
No shit.
Apparently. So, but he was a traveler, and then met my grandmother, who was a non-traveler. She was settled, and then he settled. So it's branches of both sides. But the thing is, my family have always been helpers. So, I mean, you ask the Cancerian about their family, they're like, I want to tell you everything. So my great grandmother actually worked in a nunnery, and she would, you know, before they had nurses, and so, well, they had nurses, but there was jobs that nurses didn't do, and she did those jobs. So she took care of people. You know, if someone came in with measles, she would be the one, you know, giving them a bed bath, stuff like that. And the thing is, my family have always been involved in like caring and listening. and that sense of energy has always been like there in the family. Like you talk about Reiki and they're like, like it's just very much like, yeah, you know,
You mean like in a sense, it's kind of like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's just
and
energy.
yeah,
Got
I
to
know
do.
what you're talking about. But they're also like, I don't need it because I got my own, you know,
Yeah,
like
got your own practice. Yeah.
exactly. So, but that tends to be with the women in the family. I'm actually the first guy to be practicing, which is interesting. Anyway,
Yeah. So this is like obviously you've got ancestral lines that are playing into this, and
mm.
I think that's a really interesting thing. Like, how would one connect with their ancestral lines? Because now I ask these questions because I don't have that how would you say the psychic abilities developed as well as someone like you that was very natural with it. Do you connect with your ancestors much through any practices or
Can I be honest with you? I mean, I've worked with Ammonite, which I've found, I think it's Ammonite from my research I found can be helpful for connecting with like past and history and lineage and stuff.
okay.
But I'm still, all of my life, right? I've had visions all of my life. When I close my eyes, it's like there's a constant film playing. Um, and, you know, unless you're like off. Um, but I don't know whether sometimes it's guides, ancestors, or past life. And
Right.
I haven't really found information out there that it can help you discern. I guess meditation, specific practice, and then identifying those things within meditation. But the thing is, when you're getting new stuff, if you've had a lot of lives, a lot of the times it's new stuff coming in.
Right.
Um,
Whether it's a past life or whether it's an ancestor, you don't know what you're communing with,
right.
what you're tapping
Right.
into.
There is a really good meditation that you can do just to make sure, you know, if you're constantly getting that new information, just putting your sort of guides in front of a really bright light just to like identify them.
So this would be like go into your safe space kind of a situation
Right.
and get
Right.
your guides to stand in front of a white light. So what you see a black silhouette of them?
A
Or
black silhouette, but it will also like show like nothing can hide from that.
okay. Oh,
So
right,
when you're working with your guides, you want to see, okay, is this guide carrying a sword? Do they have armor on? You know, do they, you
right,
know, like stuff like that you're able to see.
right.
And so one thing, actually, there is one thing that helps you work with ancestors. If you set an intention to communicate with your ancestors, and then I don't know if you do, if you've ever tried automated writing.
Just like flowing with free thoughts and yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
So
haven't.
just say, right. So just saying before before you start, like I set an intention to allow my ancestors to, you know, help me move the pen, and you just start writing and you just let go of any attachment or anything, and you just like set a timer, go for 5 minutes, and then look back and see if there's any relevant information in there,
Right.
and then cherry pick that. That is one technique I've found with an ammonite in your hand can help.
Ammonite being the opalized shells, right?
Yeah, I think I've got one here.
For anyone playing at home, this is ammonite.
Hmm.
Um, Millions of years old, I can assume. So that's you found that as really good connected to ancestral in your
Right.
personal experience, anyway.
In my personal experience, I think it's this spiral, and it's almost like that
Yeah.
spiral is like the timeline and the narrative, and
Oh,
then
yeah, yeah. Coming from source.
right,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So how did you start out with all your practices? I remember you mentioning when you were younger, you used to collect herbs and just burn them around the house.
Well, yeah, and I used to do people's heads in, like everything, all my books were all like magic, like everything I wanted to watch, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Charmed, Buffy, like everything. I wouldn't watch anything that wasn't like about that, you
Right.
know?
Something
And
supernatural.
all my family were like, can't we watch football? Because they're from Liverpool.
Right.
And put the football on. And I'm like, no, like she's invoking fairies. Like, can you wait? So I mean, I guess that was a sort of byproduct. And I very much grew up that way. You know, as a child, I really believed that people could fly. Um, and I was obsessed with flying as well. I used to just jump off things.
Break anything?
No, but I'm not recommending that to anyone.
Yeah.
But I never broke anything. I did sprain an ankle once. But you know, I guess then it started to develop, and I went to this one lady. I mean, as a kid, I used to just constantly talk to like plants and trees and save little insects, and I believed everything was equal and everything, you know, even a rock had a spirit, not to quote Pocahontas. And then, yeah, I went to this shop and I looked in this glass cabinet, and it was an indoor market, and it was one of those, you know, gothy, witchy shops with like, you know, dragons, glittery dragons everywhere.
Goblets
Uh,
with bells on them.
right.
Yeah.
And there was this pendulum in the window. No one was near it, and it just started going like this in front of me,
Right.
you know. And then I went home, and I mean, when I was at home around the same time, like I was looking at candles and I would like stare at them, which is a meditation practice called Anja, Anja. And I would stare at them and it would like grow. And I was like, what is happening? Like, and it got more and more like that. And I went back to that shop where the pendulum was swaying and I told her, and she just reached through and pulled it out and gave it to me. Um, and then I was going back, I was getting oils and started to work with those, created a book of shadows. Um, I used to, because I really disliked PE, I used to like cast like spells to like cast me into astral light so my teachers couldn't see me and ask me for my PE kit. So I'd just get to avoid it. And they never asked, you know, they never asked. And it wasn't to affect them, it was only to affect me and how I was being seen,
Right.
you know, and that's such a big lesson.
My book of shadows that you shared with me. At
Yeah.
least something to that effect.
Yeah.
Back in another time when we were
Right.
pirates. So yeah.
What did you just say?
When we were pirates.
Oh, okay.
I mean in some
um
sense of the word, if you will.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I was just my spirit really drawn me to what you said about being pirates. I'll have to look into that. Anyway,
Last line.
so
Did you ever have any problem coming out of the spiritual closet then? Because it sounds like you were really liberal with expressing your um connection to the divine.
yeah.
Did,
Well,
did
in school I was very open with it. You know, I was very open. I was very open in expressing it. And I was actually surrounded by like-minded people. Like, you know, in school, we were the weird kids, you know. We had like I made a group of friends, and all of our signs were like earth signs, water signs, air signs, and fire signs. And there was a four of us, and we just used to like hang out and go to graveyards, um, and just hang out in graveyards. But so there was never really a problem coming out of the spiritual closet, only really in relationships and around super religious people, because I find that the fear can impact my practice.
right, yeah, fair call, fair call.
And I just kind of want to get on with my stuff in peace.
Particularly
Um,
when you're first getting into a relationship and you don't want to come on so strong, like, oh, by
right,
the way, I speak to metaphysical entities,
right.
you know.
You know, but there is times within relationships now where I'm like, oh, by the way, your nan is like, she's there and she's just saying this and she looks like this. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, she told me to tell you, and if I don't tell you, it's going to play on my mind. Um, or some people they clutch so hard onto the physical experience and onto the 3D experience that anything outside of that is a threat, you know? Some
Yeah.
people, and I believe that everyone's journey is their own, and never to, enforce or project my sort of views and my reality onto their experience,
Yeah.
Um,
You mentioned the 3D, man. This has been a hot topic ever since the Saturn Jupiter conjunct has kind of
right,
happened. A lot of people been
right.
talking about the Earth is splitting off into two different frequencies, and people in the 3D will be left behind, and people in the 5D will ascend. What's your take on all of this? Because I certainly got opinions on this.
I've got opinions as well. Okay, so first things first, ascension is internal.
Yep.
That's the first thing. It's internal. And what it actually is going deeper and deeper and deeper into the conscious. That's what I believe, going deeper into that subconscious. But also, doesn't this sound very similar? Doesn't this like ring a bell, when the angels came and blew their horns, and
You're saying judgment.
only those who were purer than thou would rise and go to the pearly gates where everyone gets to live a life of serenity and peace and, you know.
There's a lot of parallels. Yeah.
So this thing of like, I just find that when we talk about ascension, what we're basically saying is, okay, our experience of anything that isn't that is irrelevant and cannot be counted. So then what happens, like what I mean by that, say you get food poisoning or a cold, say you get a cold,
Okay.
and you're in bed and you're lacking energy, you're a bit snotty, stuff like that. One of these 5D individuals would have a belief that you didn't have the right to be lacking in energy, or, to have a sniffle, or so what that actually does is it discounts and discredits people's genuine experience, their authenticity of their experience, their reality, their perception, and we are creating, as we create our own reality, you know so what we're doing again is like, I just feel like it's discrediting. And let's be honest, I know this is an age-old conversation. You really got me going here. Spiritual ego is a major issue.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
a major problem. Being humble is one of, when we're humble, we're able to empathize. We're able to stand in a space with someone and show love and show compassion and connection.
Right.
When we believe that we have transcended and we are woke AF,
Oh, I hate that word, but go on. I hate
woke,
that word woke.
hashtag AF,
Yeah.
woke, woke, woke. No, sorry. So when we believe that we're woke, what we're actually doing is we're not having grace with ourselves to experience the vast array of things that life gives us.
Hmm.
We're not, it's pigeonholing.
Yeah.
It's
I
a pigeon.
I feel like to even think that you've ascended, or to even think that you're woke or spiritually awoken, it's like you're not, like, you may be on a path of spiritual awakening, but that awakening is constantly going on, and probably not until you reach a point of enlightenment do you get to
Right.
like Buddha level enlightenment. You're
Mm-hmm.
still waking up. There's never I am awake. It's
Right.
I'm
Because
probably waking up.
even in your last life, you're still processing.
Sure.
Even in your last life, you're still doing the work.
Yeah.
So anyone actually in this life in a body in this life is not woke or ascended. They are waking and ascending,
Yeah.
like
which
you
means
said.
we, which means we can't have that full crossover to people believing that and I feel like people believe this quite literally, that the earth is going to split off into two.
Right.
And I think I don't like this narrative, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people getting into spirituality, they're getting carried away with what they hear on social media, and because they're still hanging around people which are very much attached to the 3D
Right.
uh, density, as it is, the D, from what I
Mhm.
understand, that they may even feel like they've done the wrong thing, or they've missed the bus, with this great conjunction,
Right.
that they've missed the bus, and, oh, what am I supposed to do? So
Right.
I think, I think, we got to understand we're still waking up. It's a slow process, but small victories, I think, is another thing that we really need to, be aware of.
Right.
We're not going to be able to control the weather after, 6 months of getting into witchcraft.
Mhm.
You know, we got to be happy with those little miracles that kind of turn up here
Right.
and there.
Even the small things, being able to, you know, be body positive. Maybe
Sure.
you've been concentrating on body positivity and you wake up and you each day you actually start to feel more body positive. That in itself is magic.
Sure.
Those small things, it's not just about this constantly this ethereal realm that is unreachable and untouchable. And it just feels like I'm holier than thou, I'm divine. And it also sounds, I think personally, it's incredibly like self-involved,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because what you're actually doing is inflating yourself. Do you know what I mean? What those people are doing, sorry, is inflating themselves. They're you know, they're making out that spirituality has one purpose and one purpose only, and not leaving room for all the other things that we get to enjoy, like shadow work. Shadow work is actually incredibly enjoyable because you get to know yourself, you get to know people, you get to you get to recognize things within your family that your family do that you did or
Yeah.
you've been doing, and you get to recognize that, and that and it's at that level of awareness is incredible you
I,
know
I think the end result of shadow work is great.
yeah.
The process of going through it can
Mhm.
be a little bit difficult sometimes, because
Right.
really, a lot of shadow work is breaking down what you previously believed
Exactly. Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
yourself or your surroundings.
And sometimes that physically looks like a breakdown.
Oh yeah, it results in a break,
Yeah.
but I think that comes down to the person's fortitude as well. Like,
Right.
people can go through that, they can go through that shadow work, and they can
Right.
go one of two ways. They can claim to be the victim because things have gone so bad for themselves, and
Right.
look for the external to provide for them to help them, or they can go within and be like, actually, I created this problem for myself. I can fix this problem for myself. And
Mhm.
that's I think that's when it really, people really find that change. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Exactly, and seeing what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for.
sure, sure.
I once had this person. I was going through a really tricky time in my relationships, and I once had this person say to me, um, you know, let me know when you are. What was it? When you're not feeling so fearful anymore, or let me know, and then we can speak. And that is another thing. I've had very personal experiences within the spiritual community where people are like, you're not in a good, happy, positive, bouncy space, then we can't connect.
Yeah, right.
And that isn't that the isn't that like the antithesis of compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think
And
I think
isn't
that's where
compassion
I think that's where someone like you or I kind of, if we meet somebody that's not in that happy, bouncy state, I mean, we're not in that state all the time. God knows
Exactly.
you're a Cancerian. Um, but but I see this as a big opportunity though. When I come across somebody that is not in that big happy, there we go, Mr. Crab.
Oh, go on.
But I think when somebody does turn up and they're not in that happy, bouncy state, to me, that's like, a lot of time people, they're like, oh, I'm sorry to bring this up, or, I don't want to bring down the mood of the live that you're doing. I'm like, no, we're here to
Exactly.
talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
so, and that's,
That support, that community, that connection, especially on social media, is needed now more than ever.
absolutely.
We're all in our little bubbles. So
Well, we got to pop those bubbles, don't we?
mhm.
It's a bit tricky though. I don't know. I try and keep my space as open as I possibly can. I'm really happy that on when I do my lives on social media, I'll get people from all spectrums. From young liberal greenhead trans activists to 40-year-old gun-toting conservatives, and
Right.
I don't care. I don't care what side you come from. If you're here for the healing, if you're here to build the community and just connect, that's what
Right.
it's about. And this is how we're going to pop these bubbles. And this is how we're all just going to unite. And
Mhm.
maybe someone from one side isn't seeing something as clear as somebody else on the other side. But I think if we come together and we're actually connecting, we can. It's not about telling someone about what's right and what's wrong. I think it's about
Right.
leading by example, and
Right.
in that, it gives someone that ability to just kind of observe and be like, oh, okay, so that's one perspective. I'll consider
Yeah.
that now, seeing as that person
Yeah.
wasn't trying
Yeah.
to
And that.
jam it down my throat.
Yeah. 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 That's incredibly important. I think what you just said, touching upon that, there's one perspective and that's one reality. And the real strength is actually in the mixing of those.
Yeah.
Like you look at eclectic witches, there is a level of freedom in that,
Mm.
where they can cherry pick what they connect with, what they align with in their craft. Um, and I guess very much the same for community. But that being said, there is a level of like spiritual work you do where you do generally more often feel lighter than heavier.
Yeah. So what spiritual work would you feel heavy in? I mean,
No, I mean like without the work, maybe you'd feel heavier, or maybe there'd be a general sense of like not having as much energy as you do when you're practicing.
mm,
I found anyway, like if I like woke up and I listened to, I don't know, Miley Cyrus for day. If you like Miley Cyrus, go for it. I mean, it's not, it's not, I'm not
not your
throwing shade at anyone. But if you like that, go for it. But if I woke up and I played some of my drum and did some sound bowls, listen to some frequencies, work with my tuning forks a little bit, something like that, I would feel very different.
absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what I'd mean between that heaviness and that lightness,
Yeah, for sure, for
not
sure.
being woke, it's just feeling at peace more,
That
maybe.
that that really reminds me, if we're going on to the frequencies and the sound healing side of things, I saw an amazing documentary a bit over a year ago about how these scientists, and I love it when science comes together with this
Yeah,
kind of
me
stuff.
too. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and these scientists were playing, they were playing different music to
right,
different water, to different glasses of water, and then they froze them, and then they looked at the crystalline structure of the ice crystals that were inside it. And you get something like classical music, or you get like Tibetan sound bowls, and you get these beautiful snowflake looking things, but then you get something else, which is maybe white noise, or metal music. And I'm not trying to single out our metalheads out there. Most of the time metalheads are actually big teddy bears,
I know, right?
which I find is really strange, because the music, when you saw what it does, it just gives it this really distorted, like fractured look. And And it was the same when they did the same thing with the experiment, and they gave good intention to the water, and they said, "I love you, thank you, you know, you're beautiful." Or they had one like, "You disgust me, I hate you." Same
Hmm.
results, you know. And
Hmm.
so that to me was fascinating,
I
you know.
think that's field of study is called cymatics, CYM, or semantic. It's not semantic. I think it's cymatics, like cinema.
Oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure it derives from that Latin word. But also, I saw this experiment actually in a primary school, and it was very much along the same lines. They had two plants, exactly the same plant, same seed, same mother, and they were under bell jars, you know, and they were watered at exactly the same time. They were in exactly the same position, given exactly the same food. But the kids would go and they would say, "I love you, you're so beautiful," you know, all this stuff, and they would say all these things to it, but to the other one they'd be like, "I hate you, you're disgusting, da 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 da," and one of them died and one of them didn't,
yeah,
you know. And people are like, "Oh well, maybe there's variance, maybe one was watered more, maybe," but it was like it was a lab controlled experiment, all the stuff was the same.
yeah. And
The only
I've seen that
variable was
recreated on more than one occasion as well. So
right.
I feel like, you know, anyone skeptic of that is kind of like, dude, do the experiment yourself if you don't
Right.
believe it. Because, and then, you know, that you know, the thing is, it's like, if this is how a plant reacts, how do you think a human with a more
Right.
complex consciousness, at least what we believe we have a more complex consciousness.
Right.
I guess it's probably it's a different kind of consciousness, really. Um,
Right.
you know, I don't think we necessarily have a more complicated one, but it's just different.
I think it comes down to scale, maybe as well, of our brains and this maybe even the scale of our brains, micro and macro, and the scale of plants' consciousness, like and the space between it or something. I don't know. I feel
How
like
do you
that
think
plays into
how do you think that works? Let's scale
it.
that up. Let's look at like solar systems and galaxies. You know, I guess in a sense that's creation, that's life.
And that's what, when you were speaking earlier about the earth splitting, I very much like, you know, almost like saw this cell, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
this like cell splitting, and maybe that's where it comes from. Maybe it comes from our sort of connection to the way our bodies are built, and on a microbiological level about how the cells are formed and how they split. And you know, even when you talk about solar systems, you know, that Higgs boson experiment where they smash the particles together, all of the all of the sort of offshoots were all spiraled, you know. And when we look at the, when, like you were saying, when we look at the universe zoomed out, it looks like chlorophyll.
Yeah, well, I mean, repeating patterns. You know, you've got
Right.
the fractal patterns that
Mhm.
keep
Right.
occurring.
But then the interesting question is, where does our consciousness, you know, we are the universe experiencing itself, you know, we're not a central focal point. We are in it, we're in the web, you know. So what is that? Can we even name it? And that's what I also think is dangerous when we come back to that ascension, I'm ascended culture, because what that's saying is, I've named it, I've identified it, you know, I've unlocked it, I've got the key, I know it. And that, you know, it's very much like, I don't see it as that different from like fundamentalists in Christianity,
Yeah,
you know, that I've got it, I know the answers, I've got the key. And with that, there is a lack of curiosity, a lack of you know, exploration, which isn't that what life's about? Aren't we supposed to be having fun and enjoying it and learning and
yeah, yeah. I think, you know, as you were describing that, people like, I've done this, I've done that. One of my favorite memes out there, I once saw it was, you know, the Batman slapping someone else, and a Robin. I think Robin's saying, "I'm enlightened," and Batman cuts him off saying, "There is no I. Keep meditating."
See, exactly, you know, and just as you said that, a feather, I don't even have feathers in my room.
It's just
Like, I'm allergic to feathers, but a feather just came and fell on my hand.
it's a sign.
Um,
What does it mean?
well, I think feathers are usually a sort of, you know, if you're into angels or anything like that, it's usually a reminder of that. I often take it as there's a spirit nearby.
Air energy,
Yeah, air energy as well.
which is ideas and communication.
Right. Right. Oh, speaking of, can we backtrack to what you said about like, do you have any advice for people starting out?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So 1 second.
1 second. I'll put another graphic up on the screen.
It's kind of a basic, but I think this is incredibly important and it's important to respect. Air,
Mm-hmm.
water, abalone shell, or whatever you want to represent it.
Mm-hmm.
Earth, something organic,
Sage.
right? Ethically sourced and ethically grew, just in case anyone calls me out on that. And fire.
Of course.
Right. And with that, you know, people think, oh, you just light it and wave it around. But it's actually what we're actually doing is respecting these four elements and then bringing your intention in to clear it. You know, so it's like kind of gives it the foundation for the intention to sit on and to be carried.
So when you're doing your cleansing process there, you're involving all four elements, the abalone shell to collect everything that kind of falls down.
Right.
You know, representing water, you got the fire, you got the earth, and you've got the feather
Right.
washing, swishing the wind around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then you've got air element, which is bringing in movement, right? It's bringing in like air element moves, it's the mind and it's freedom, it's liberation, right? So it's about, yeah. But, you know, elements, you never stop learning with elements. Like even this week, I've been looking at how elements sort of impact energy healing and how you can work with elements and energy, which is really fascinating. And like the meridian systems and stuff. And I spent time in China learning about meridian systems and food and stuff like that as well. So it's interesting, like that is one side of the practice that continues to grow, you know. And so many people can explore that as well. You have botany, you have energy workers, you have people who work with, you know, crystal masters like yourself, crystal wizards. You know, you have, well, you're not just a crystal wizard, but one of your current
Yeah.
things. Anyway, you know, and all these different sort of varying of practices that actually bring in elements, which is interesting.
You mentioned your time in China. What kind of practices did you pick up in China? Because you also mentioned the meridians. How does that play into stuff? What are the meridians? But for anyone out there playing at home that doesn't, that might not be across this, what are the meridians?
So meridian systems are like channels that run throughout your body that connect with different organs, and then they're responsible for like different things. So in Chinese medicine, we have more than four elements.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So there is actually, let me see if I get this right. Earth, fire, water, air, wood, and metal. And each one of those, like for example, metal is responsible for the lungs.
Okay.
What do the lungs do? The lungs
Extract oxygen out of the air.
Yeah, they extract oxygen. So then we're looking at how we bring in energy.
Okay.
You know, so that's a meridian system that sort of aligns with that. And then those channels are on specific places in the body. You know, the gallbladder has a meridian system, which is also responsible for physical, emotional, spiritual, energetic imbalances or balances, you know, and you can actually find out how they're balanced and unbalanced depending on how you feel, what you're experiencing, stuff like that. So in China, I actually ended up in a village with lots of healers, lots of traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. There was lots and lots of, and most of them were vegan as well. So they didn't have, you know, weird like ground up puffer fish, you know, in a tablet. Yeah. It was like friendly. So it was very much like interesting seeing how the culture is changing there as well. You know,
As
but
in,
also how
when you say changing, are they going away from their roots or coming back to their roots?
all coming back, all coming back. So it's interesting. You go to a pharmaceutical place, which I don't like. But anyway, you go to one of those places, you ask for a migraine tablet. In China, they might give you, you know, if it's not vegan or veggie, maybe like goat horns ground up, you know. And I actually had an experience this myself, and I read the ingredients, and I just learned the character for goat, and I was like, oh, I just wanted a paracetamol. So yeah, so you know, it's very much like ingrained in the culture, but then you look at, you know, practices that are like Eastern, Western, combined Sanskrit, like Reiki and Japanese and also, or you know, crystal healing even, you know, all these different sort of practices and energy work that actually incorporate these medicines. And that's what I was learning there, but also not that, just nature,
Mm,
being in nature, being surrounded by raw, powerful, natural nature. And I feel like that's some of the most um, kind of explosive spiritual experiences we can have.
sure, sure.
You know, just
Yeah,
seeing uncomplicated. You know,
exactly. And I think one thing I found interesting when I was learning about the Aboriginal culture in Australia, that they don't technically have Aboriginal medicine. They didn't need medicine. They
oh,
just lived off the land. They knew how nature worked and they were in sync with it before white fella turned up. They were in sync with it and they didn't need medicine because they were just so connected to Mother Earth. And
wow.
their stories are just like, you know, next level when you hear the dreaming stories that they have.
Mhm.
And yeah, and the times that we have actually connected with that energy, some of you may be aware of stories about making lightning strike in the
Right.
jungle. Were you there in Byron Bay when we did that?
No.
No, we made lightning strike in the jungle. Oh,
That's amazing. I
yep.
have changed, I've experienced changes of air pressure at will,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I didn't know that about Aboriginal culture though. But then, you know, one thing that I would like to raise here is coming from an ancestry of people who worked in this, and I can feel that they did, and you know, they never had witch hunts, you know, and even to this day, I still believe there are witch hunts. There are people who will get on, they will troll energy workers, they'll troll witches, they'll, you know, so if you're getting that, just ignore it because it is like a modern day witch hunt, so just like blanket. But those people never had that. So it's interesting. Western culture has had this like snip, you know, it went up to a level of knowledge and then snip, you know, and men were ostracized. Men were, you know, chased out of villages and stuff. And so what that's actually done also, that's impacted our you know, medical systems, you know.
Mm.
The word drug comes from the word plant, you know, like it's where it comes from. But in Western culture, it's like we're over reliant on Eastern culture because that's actually, we kind of recognize that and we've forgotten it.
Well, this is the thing when it comes to like drugs, if you will, in the medical sense. I mean, the most of them, if not all, are derived from natural things. They've just been refined, really.
Right.
They've just been processed and refined so they can fit down into a little syringe or a
Right.
capsule, if you will, rather than munching on a kilo of ginger
Right.
or something like that. Instead, we've managed to put it down to a little capsule. And
Right.
but you say like that snip happened with
Mm.
the culture. Would you say that was like with the rise of the church, or is this
Yeah.
other things?
Yeah. And I think that impacted us on many levels, not just in regards of like drugs. I think it impacted us like knowing about astral travel, having communities of witchy people, which is such a blessing now online, right? I think it impacted our, you know, being able to practice divination without being seen as like a woo woo or into dark stuff or into the occult, just because you are able to see into the astral worlds.
Mm.
You know, like I think that it's impacted us on a level that's much larger than just drugs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, when we're talking about, like, you know, you talk about that snip, I feel like it's still happening. I feel
Mm,
like but it's not coming from the conservative religious side anymore. It's
right,
coming from the scientific community that will only accept what is present in the physical,
right.
and they have trouble accepting what is in the metaphysical. And I was having a bit of a 1-2 with somebody on TikTok recently about like the existence of the metaphysical, and very atheist, you know, when people atheist, you know, but it was like this person was so adamant that the metaphysical didn't exist, and I was like, well,
Right.
what's the imagination? How do you weigh? How do you measure the dog you are imagining in your mind? Now that I said, imagine a dog, how do you weigh and measure that? You can draw a picture and bring it into the physical, but while it's still there, it's in the metaphysical. The metaphysical very much does exist, but because it can't be measured, it can't be weighed, it's almost like discounted. So,
Right.
you know, I think there's,
But
you know,
also, isn't that a danger to? Sorry, there's a what? Sorry.
no, sorry, you go on. What is the danger to what?
Isn't the that dangerous to the scientific community? Imagine if Tesla never thought of the air having capability to carry signal. Imagine, you know, even Einstein came out and he said, just when we imagine something, it's just as real as it existing because you've already thought of it. It's already come into being. You've already imagined it. And he really, you know, he connected this sense of imagination with science, with invention, with numbers, and was curious. And again, I'm going to come back to fundamentalism because I do feel like it is fundamentalism because it's I've got the answers, I know everything.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I've solved it. I've solved the riddle, everyone. I've got it. Here's the meaning of life. And it's like 42 in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know?
But then it almost contradicts itself, because, you know, scientists, people that, I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm attacking the scientists here, because I
No,
have
of
a lot of
course not.
respect for it, but I love it when science crosses over into the metaphysical and tries to explain it, because
Right.
back in the 60s, for anyone that's not aware, Maharishi, which was the Beatles guru, really
Right.
brought meditation into the Western world and
Yeah.
encouraged a lot of people, science, to actually start looking into it. And there's one guy I follow, Joe Dispenza, which is absolutely amazing. This man, but he's a neuroscientist. I mean, this guy's a
Right.
neuroscientist. He understands quantum mechanics, and he's brought the two together, and it's amazing. And when I hear scientists, you know, when they take that attitude of like, I've got the answers, I know what's going on, but at the same time, they will also say science is always trying to prove itself wrong, and it's just like, then why are you so close-minded to trying to approach the metaphysical?
Right.
You
There's
know?
actually an exact term for this. There's an exact term.
Scientism.
Can't remember. Wish I could because I'm on this video. But there's an exact term that you can use when identifying these people who will have no other answer but the scientific one. But the thing is science. The whole existence of science is to disprove.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like that's the purpose of it, to disprove, to experiment, calculate, gather data, disprove. But the thing
Trying.
is, we do have data, it's just disregarded by these people
Yeah, yeah,
who don't want to accept it. And it's like, wait,
yeah,
that's science. You look at data, you know? And
yeah.
but the data, the experiments are constantly being done, and we've yet to do every experiment.
Yes, yes,
You know?
absolutely. And this is like what I
So,
mean. Like before we had that spiritual movement back in the 60s, of course, before our time. But
Mm.
before that, a lot of Western people would be like, oh, what's this meditation hooey? This is nothing. Science doesn't say this exists, but science caught up in the end,
Right.
you
And
know?
now we're able to scan the brain and see how fluids are actually drained from the brain that are detrimental to the brain tissue
Yeah,
during meditation.
yeah,
You know, we see less inflammation of the brain. We see also, I think it's the amygdala, and it controls like fear. There's a part of the brain that controls fear, and that is actually we see less activity in that area during meditation. You know, so I think it's incredibly, it's incredibly important, but it's also like what you were saying about that witch hunt, just like live and let live, like live and let live. Whatever, is any harm being done? No, live and let live. And people have come for me. I do lives. I do all that stuff. I've had people come for me and try and you know whether they be scientists or whether they be religious fanatics. And I'm like, there's one person bringing stress into this. There's one person bringing fear into this, and it's not me.
yeah, for sure.
So
You're
there is a
promoting
level of just like
unity and
compassion,
yeah,
just
right.
compassion. It's so simple. It's so basic. None of us can claim to know everything because we are also not those scientists. We're not those people. All we have is the data that we're given, and we don't have all the data. None of us have all the data.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So yeah.
So we
Anyway,
just got to keep seeking for it. So
right.
yeah,
And again, enjoying the process, staying curious, knowing which fight to fight, knowing what we know, knowing what we're invested in and knowing what we're not invested in, knowing, allowing other people to speak for that. And
yeah,
having patience and being open-minded, I feel like could be incredibly important. But there is like a modern day, you say to someone, I'm a witch, and they go, some people you'll see it like they'll like freeze, and you're like, I'm not doing anything to you, like
yeah.
I'm just saying that I like crystals and I'm interested in energy, and like
I actually avoid the word witch personally. I
right,
I go with light worker.
yeah,
Um, I think because witch definitely does have that stigma attached to it.
right,
Something you can't avoid. But I feel like light worker is just you say light worker, people are like, what does that mean? Or at least the most negative thing they're going to think about you is that you're some airy fairy,
right,
whatever. They're not going to think that your intent is wrong, or
right.
skewed or anything.
But
So
then you look at these communities like, I have lesbian friends who call themselves a dyke, and they're like, that's my word, I'm going to own it. People in the queer community actually reclaiming the word queer, which means weird.
yeah, right. Isn't that,
It
I
means
always,
strange.
yeah,
So sort of reclaiming that and owning these things, and they're so loaded that I feel like the only way to like dispel the sort of people's obsession with the negativity, the negative kind of, by owning it, and what
right,
you said earlier about actions speaking louder than anything
yeah.
else.
So you would continue to say witch in the sense that you want to be the example that this isn't all
Yeah.
witches. And I'm going to
I'm
leave
not going to
charge.
let anyone discredit. Like, I don't have any other word for it. Light worker, yes. I definitely agree with you there, and I think that it's important for people to identify with a particular community. You
Yeah.
know, so if you want to call yourself something, call yourself something. Whatever you identify with. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Well,
So,
man, I think I might wrap things up here at the moment.
sure.
But before we go, do you have any socials that you want to share with anyone if they've made it all the way through to here? Do you want to let people know what it is you do, any services and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a tarot reader. I've been a professional tarot reader for a number of years. Um, I also doing lots of workshops, sound healing, like little guided things. What else am I doing? Oh, I'm making a tarot deck. My current socials are Dandy Tarot over on Facebook.
I'll put that down in the description. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't decided on I'm starting a TikTok account.
yeah,
I'm deciding between Dandycraft and Dandivines.
all right. We'll get a poll down in the comments down below.
Or I'll let you know, and we'll list it anyway. We'll list the socials in the comments, and that's where you can find me. And yeah, like if you want to have further this conversation or anything, please feel free in the comments to, say whatever you want and have a little chat like amongst yourselves and engage with the community, definitely. And I'm sure Fox will be more than happy to like, spark up those conversations as well with you. And yeah,
sure.
you're constantly curious.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, thanks for having me on your brand shiny new channel.
It's a little bit fuzzy, but we'll get there in time. This is grassroots stuff, but it'll build up over time, and I'll
get bringing more interests.
Huh?
So
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me on the second Twisted Vibrations podcast, and catch you next time.
Bye.
Ciao. Thanks for listening to the Twisted Vibrations podcast. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and have a chat down in the comments down below, and leave any suggestions for what topics you might want to hear in the future. See you next time.